They didn't bark to scare. They didn't growl out of fear. They ran into the road like they had nothing left to lose. Cole Maddox slammed on the brakes. Dust exploded around his front tires as the heat shimmered above the blacktop. 2 German shepherd pups, no older than 4 months, stood inches from his bumper, black and tan coats burning under the Arizona sun. One of them rose onto his hind legs and pawed at the air like he was trying to speak. The other let out a single, sharp bark, high-pitched, almost unnatural. Then they spun around and bolted toward the scrub on the side of the road. Cole muttered under his breath, "What the hell?" He sat for a second, hand still locked on the wheel, heart thudding. Maybe they were just strays, or stupid. But there was something about the way they moved, purposeful, coordinated, that tugged at something old inside him, something he hadn't let himself feel in a long time. "Don't do it," he said aloud. But he was already out of the truck. The sun slammed down like a hammer as he jogged after them, boots crunching on gravel and dry weeds. The brush scratched at his jeans. Prickly pear and creosote pulled at his sleeves. The puppies weren't running blindly. They were leading. He almost didn't see her at first. She was half buried in the sand, curled under the shade of a dying mesquite tree. Her fur, once black, was bleached by sun and dirt. Her ribs jutted out like the framework of a broken umbrella. She didn't move, not even when the puppies whimpered and licked her face. Cole stopped short, stomach twisting. Jesus! One of the pups, a male, slightly bigger, stepped between him and her. He didn't growl, but his body tensed, eyes locked. Not afraid. Protective. Cole raised both hands, voice low. "Easy, buddy. I'm not here to hurt her." The smaller pup, female, pressed against the mother's flank, letting out a high, fractured whine. She was still breathing. Barely. Her side rose and fell with shallow, rattling effort. Flies buzzed around her muzzle. She didn't even twitch. Cole crouched, slow, cautious. "Hey girl, can you hear me?" He hadn't touched a dog in nearly 8 years, not since Trigger, not since he sat in that sterile room, stroking the old lab's ears while the vet whispered, "He's gone." But this wasn't about him. These dogs didn't know his story. They only knew theirs. The male pup, he looked like a Max, stepped closer but didn't back down. As Cole reached forward, his hand brushed something hidden beneath the mother's collar, a crumpled scrap of paper, brittle with dirt. He unfolded it. She tried. She did everything. His breath caught. The mother stirred. A sound escaped her throat, a low, broken growl that didn't ask for space. It demanded belief. It was the kind of sound that shattered you before it scared you. Max pushed his small body between them again, head low, eyes pleading. Cole's voice cracked. Okay, I get it." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out his phone. His thumb hesitated over the screen. For years, he'd kept the local shelter's number saved, just in case. He never thought he'd use it. He tapped it. "Hope Creek Shelter, this is Kelsey." "I need help," he said, breath short. "German Shepherd, adult female, critical, 2 puppies. I'm just off Highway 180 near old mile marker 12. Are you safe?" "Yeah, but she's not." "We're on the way. 10 minutes." Cole hung up and looked at the dog again. Her breathing was worse now, her gums pale. Her body was giving up even while her pups refused to. The female pup, Maple, he decided, nudged her mother's face again, then pressed into her side. Max sat back on his haunches and stared at Cole. Not judging, just waiting. Cole tore open a bottle of water from his truck and set the cap near the mother's mouth. No response. Max sniffed it, nudged it closer. Maple didn't move. "You're not alone," Cole whispered. "Not anymore." The van arrived faster than he expected. White, dust-streaked, with the shelter logo fading on the door. A woman in vet scrubs and cargo pants jumped out before the tires stopped turning. She knelt beside him, calm but quick. "She's still breathing?" she asked. "Barely." She nodded and tapped her radio. "Adult GSD, severe emaciation. Bring the stretcher." Two techs moved fast. Max barked once when one of them reached toward his mother. Not a warning, a question. "It's okay," Cole said. "They're here to help." Max held his gaze, then slowly stepped back. Maple stayed pressed to her mother's side until the last possible second. One tech gently lifted her away, carrying her like she was made of glass. "Help me get her up," the vet said. They moved together. Cole supported the mother's shoulders while the techs lifted her hips. She felt like nothing, less than nothing. Just bones and fur and weightless hope. Once she was in the van, an IV was clipped to her leg. Monitors beeped. The doors slammed shut. Cole stood there, frozen. The vet opened the passenger door of his truck. "They trust you," she said. "You coming?" He didn't answer. He just nodded. Max and Maple jumped into the truck like they'd done it before. Max curled on the passenger seat, tail thumping. Maple settled in the footwell, chin on her paws. As he followed the van down the road, Cole glanced at the mirror. He wasn't ready for this. He hadn't been ready when Trigger left, and he sure wasn't ready to lose another. But these two didn't ask permission. They chose him. And what they'd led him to, what had been buried in that brush under the sun, wasn't just a dying dog. It was a beginning. The shelter's back room was quiet in the way hospital rooms are quiet. Clean, controlled, but never still. Cole Maddox stood in the corner, arms crossed, back against the wall, pretending he wasn't, watching the monitors. The two pups sat near his feet like sentinels, Scout upright and alert, Maple curled tight against the baseboard, her eyes never leaving the steel table in the center of the room. Their mother lay motionless beneath a heating pad and a tangle of wires. The vet had called her critical but responsive. That was the phrase. Clinical, detached. But Cole had seen her before the IVs, before the warmth, and he knew what the truth looked like. She was one exhale away from the end. Scout stood and padded forward, nose to the glass, ears rigid. One of the machines beeped, and Maple whimpered softly. Cole didn't move. He hadn't meant to get this far in. All he wanted was to do the right thing, make the call, stay until help arrived, then drive away and forget. But here he was, pulled deeper by two sets of eyes that wouldn't let him go. Kelsey, the shelter's field lead, came in with a clipboard. "They haven't moved since we got here." Cole nodded once. "They won't." She glanced at him. "You've been around dogs before." He didn't answer right away. "I had one," he finally said. "A black Labrador, Trigger." The name tasted like rust in his mouth. He was smarter than most people I know. Used to fetch my work gloves before I even knew I'd forgotten them. Kelsey smiled faintly, then let the silence settle. She'd been around long enough to know that kind of pause meant something was still buried. "He had a heart condition," Cole said. "Caught it late. Vet told me we had options. That was a lie. The only real option was to watch him go." His throat closed for a moment. He clenched his jaw and looked away. "I held him when it happened. Told myself I'd never do it again. Never open that door. I stuck to that for 8 years. Maple rested her chin on his boot. Cole blinked hard and kept his eyes on the glass. "She didn't just crawl under that bush," he muttered. "She was placed there, hid herself, like she knew she couldn't protect them out in the open." Scout let out a soft growl, not threatening, just restless. Like something was still unresolved. Cole reached into his pocket and pulled out the worn scrap of paper again. He'd flattened it as best he could, but the edges still curled from time and heat. The ink had bled in places, but the words were still clear. She tried. She did everything. He read it again. Then again. What kind of person writes that? He asked aloud. Who leaves a note like that on a dog? Kelsey looked over. We've seen worse, but not often. Did someone dump her? Cole asked. Is that what happened? It's possible, she said gently. But the fact that she still had the pups with her, that changes things. Most mothers abandon when they're too weak to go on. She didn't. She hid them. She made it look like she was already gone. Cole murmured. Kelsey nodded. She bought them time. Long enough to find you? Cole gave a short, humorless laugh. Hell of a plan. She must have known they'd try. She couldn't have known I'd stop. But you did. Scout turned suddenly, ears up. Maple stood. The door to the treatment room opened, and Dr. Nadine stepped out, wiping her hands on her scrubs. She's stabilizing, slowly, but there's something odd. Cole straightened. What? Dr. Nadine hesitated. There's a scar, right behind her front shoulder, surgical, old. We checked for a chip but found something else. She held up a tiny, worn ID tag, strung through what remained of the dog's original collar. The letters were barely legible, but Cole squinted. Maya, if found, please return to 1472 Desert Bloom Road. A jolt ran through him. That's West Side, he said. That's the housing tract that got hit by the fire last month. Exactly, Nadine said. Evacuations were messy. Not all pets were accounted for. It's possible she ran or got separated. And someone thought she didn't make it, Cole said quietly. Could be. Nadine nodded. But she did. Somehow she did. Scout leaned into the glass. Maple pawed at the edge of the door. They're trying to see her, Cole said. Do they know she's okay? Nadine looked through the window. I think they've known everything. A long beat passed. Then Cole asked the question that had been stalking his mind since the roadside. Why me? Nadine tilted her head. Why not you? I wasn't ready. She smiled gently. No one ever is. Scout gave a small bark. Maple yipped once in response. Cole looked at them, at the paper, at the glass. Then he whispered, mostly to himself. She did everything. In the silence that followed, something shifted. A decision made not in a single moment, but layered in tiny ones, a paw on a boot, a stare through glass, a whisper in the sun. Cole Maddox didn't leave that night. He stayed. Not because he had to, but because somehow they had found him. And it wasn't just about saving a life. It was about honoring the one who had never stopped trying to protect it. Cole's thumb hovered over the contact. He had scrolled past Hope Creek Shelter in his phone for years. It had been saved since the day he found Trigger. Back when hope felt more possible, when the idea of helping meant more than just pulling over on the side of the road and looking away. He'd never called, never needed to, until now. The image of the mother dog, Maya, burned in his head, the way her body barely rose with each breath, the way her pups had stood their ground like tiny sentinels guarding a queen on her last hour. Cole tapped the number. It rang twice. Hope Creek Shelter, this is Kelsey. Her voice was calm, clipped, practiced. Not unfriendly, just efficient. I found a dog, Cole said, swallowing the dryness in his throat. 3, actually. German shepherds. 2 pups. 1 adult. She's not doing well. Where are you? Highway 180, about a mile past mile marker 12, near the old logging access road. Is the adult breathing? Barely. Are you safe? Yeah, but she's not. Hang tight. We're en route. 10 minutes. Do not try to move her. Click. 10 minutes. Cole slid the phone back into his pocket and exhaled hard. His heart was beating faster than it should have been. The adrenaline from slamming on the brakes, from following the pups, from finding her. It hadn't worn off. Scout and Maple hadn't moved from her side. Scout still watched Cole with wary eyes, but he wasn't aggressive, just cautious. Maple kept one paw on Maya's flank, as if the weight alone might keep her tethered to the world. Cole crouched again. "Hang in there, girl," he murmured. "Help's coming." Maya didn't respond. She barely seemed there at all. Then a sound in the distance. Tires on gravel. Scout rose to his feet, ears snapping forward. Maple followed, tail rigid, head low. Their tension shifted like a current in the air. The van came into view, white with the faded blue paw print logo of Hope Creek on the side. It pulled off the road with a sharp jolt, sending a plume of dust spiraling behind it. Kelsey was the first out. Cargo pants, shelter polo, clipboard in one hand. Her boots hit the ground like she'd done this 100 times, and she probably had. She didn't speak to Cole right away. She went straight to Maya. "Still breathing?" she asked without looking up. "Just barely." "Let's move," she called over her shoulder. 2 more staffers climbed out of the van, one carrying a canvas stretcher, the other a compact trauma kit. They moved like clockwork. Cole stepped back, but Scout lunged forward with a low, protective growl. Not vicious, more like a protest. "Whoa, whoa, hey," Cole said, crouching next to him. "They're here to help, just like me." Scout didn't take his eyes off the techs, but he didn't advance. His body shook with tension. "Give me a second," Kelsey said, standing. She turned to Cole. "Do they know you?" "I think so. I followed them here." "They led you?" He nodded. "Ran into the road like it was on purpose." Kelsey glanced back at the pups. "Then you're the only one they trust right now." She handed him a small, soft leash looped like a slip lead. "Just in case." Cole didn't need it. He crouched again, palm out, murmuring something low. Scout slowly inched closer and pressed his shoulder against Cole's thigh. Kelsey moved fast. She signaled the techs. "Let's get vitals on the adult. 4 inches fluid push. Pup contact minimal. Go!" The male tech knelt beside Maya, checking for ephemeral pulse. "She's thready, but there." He muttered. "Temp's low. Heat stroke, dehydration, starvation," Kelsey said, tapping her comm. "We've got a 3-level emergency here." Maple let out a piercing bark when the stretcher unrolled. "Easy, little one," Cole said, sliding between her and her mother. "They're going to help her." But Maple lunged when the tech reached out. Not with aggression, desperation. "She's not letting go," one tech said. "She's not supposed to," Kelsey replied. "Cole?" He hesitated for half a second, then knelt again, gently wrapping his arms around Maple's chest. "She needs you to trust me," he whispered, "just for a minute." Maple froze, eyes locked on his. Then for a breath she let him lift her, light as a bundle of kindling. He stepped back while the techs worked. Scout didn't growl this time, but he didn't move either. His eyes tracked every motion. They slid Maya onto the stretcher with surgical precision, her limbs limp, her head lolling sideways. Cole felt bile rise in his throat. "She's gone, isn't she?" he asked, barely audible. Kelsey shook her head. "Not yet." As they loaded her into the van, Maple let out a low sound, part moan, part cry. It broke something in the air. Kelsey turned. "You coming with us?" Cole blinked. "Can I?" "They trust you. That matters right now." He looked at Scout and Maple. Dusty, tense, but looking at him like he was their answer. He nodded. "Yeah, I'll follow." Kelsey pointed to the van. "Ride with us. You're already in this." Cole opened the back door of the shelter van, and the pups jumped in without hesitation. No leash, no second thought, just instinct. Maya lay stretched out between them, tubes snaking across her chest. The tech clipped sensors to her paw pads, adjusted her oxygen mask. Scout settled beside her hip. Maple curled near her head. The doors closed. Inside the humming, sterile quiet of the moving van, Cole sat in the jump seat, watching them. The engine roared to life. He wasn't family. He wasn't even supposed to be there. But at that moment, he was the only one they had. And somehow, that made him enough. The hallway outside the ICU was cold and too bright. The linoleum reflected everything. The movement of passing shadows, the red flash of the heart monitor behind the door, the quiet stillness of two pups who had made this sterile place their battleground of hope. Scout hadn't moved since the van ride. He sat just inches from the ICU door, ears up, tail flat, eyes fixed on the frosted glass. Maple had curled tightly on the tile, her body pressed to Cole's leg like gravity alone wasn't enough to hold her to the ground. Cole hadn't planned on staying. The idea had been to hand them off. Let the professionals do what they do. Walk away before it all became too familiar. Before he let anything in. But when one of the techs asked, "Your family, right?" and the receptionist waved him past the paperwork because the pups wouldn't leave his side, he'd nodded without thinking. And now, somehow, he was still here, sitting cross-legged on a hallway floor, with two strangers who didn't speak, but said everything. Scout sighed and shifted his weight. Maple's paw twitched in her sleep. Cole leaned back against the wall and let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "I had a dog once," he said softly. "Black Labrador. Big head, bigger heart. His name was Trigger." Neither pup moved, but their ears twitched. "I found him under a truck I was fixing. Barely more than a shadow back then. Greasy, shivering, scared of everything but me. Took me 2 weeks just to get him to eat from my hand." He smiled to himself. "After that, he followed me everywhere. Wouldn't even go to the bathroom unless I walked out with him. Drove me nuts some days. But he was mine." Maple shifted, resting her chin on Cole's boot. "He lived 9 years. Cole continued. "Didn't show a thing wrong until one morning he couldn't get up. Turned out his heart was giving out piece by piece." The words slowed, heavy. "I tried everything. Pills, diet, walks that turned into Kerry's. And one Tuesday morning, when the sun was just starting to come in through the garage window, he looked at me. Just looked." Scout stood up, turned and sat beside Cole, pressed against him. Just enough to say, "I hear you." I held his face when the vet gave the injection. Told him it was okay to let go. Told myself it was mercy. His voice cracked. The memory wasn't blurry. It was vivid, sharp, still raw. I walked out of that clinic and promised myself, no more dogs, ever. I couldn't go through that again. Couldn't lose something that gave everything and never asked why. He didn't realize he'd stopped speaking until he felt Maple licking his fingers. His chest ached in that way it hadn't in years. Not sharp, not stabbing, just full. Pressurized. Like grief never really left, it just took naps until something brought it back. A tech passed by, whispering into a headset, eyes careful not to meet Cole's. Another bark echoed from down the hall, followed by the quick click of nails on tile. The world went on. But right here, in this quiet corner of hurt and hope, time stood still. Cole wiped his face with his sleeve. The tears had come before he could catch them. Not loud, not heavy, just enough to make his throat burn. Maple climbed onto his lap, curled like a comma against his chest. Scout sat beside him, still like a guard on night duty. He let them stay. Let himself stay. Later that night, Kelsey came by with a blanket and a bottle of water. She didn't say much, just set them down gently. "They don't do this for everyone," she said. "They're not just dogs." Cole answered, "Number they're not?" She started to walk away, but then turned back. "By the way, we called the address on the tag. The number's disconnected. The house is gone. Fire took it. No one came back." Cole nodded slowly. "She didn't run," he said. "She waited. She protected them. And when she couldn't anymore, she let them go, told them to find someone." Kelsey gave a small smile. "Looks like they did." Long after she left, Cole sat awake. The hallway dimmed as the night shift took over. Voices dropped to whispers. Lights dimmed. Somewhere in the distance, a dryer hummed. Maple slept on his chest, her breath warm against his flannel. Scout lay across his legs, heavy but grounding. He didn't feel like a man in a shelter. He felt like a man remembered. When the vet walked by close to midnight and peeked through the glass, she gave a slight nod. "She's holding steady," she whispered. Cole didn't answer. He just closed his eyes, rested his hand on Scout's back, and stayed. Not because he had to, but because somewhere, deep under all the drywall and medical charts and machines, something had opened again. Not fully, but enough. It was the sound of something shifting, not loud, not dramatic, just the tiniest intake of air, the gentlest twitch beneath a blanket of exhaustion, that made Scout sit upright. Cole hadn't slept. The shelter's hallway had quieted into a hush that only existed between midnight and dawn. Maple had been curled in his lap for hours, her chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Scout lay beside him, back to the ICU door, ears turned toward the silence. Then it happened. Scout stood. No bark, no whine, just a sudden alertness, a change in posture, a pivot toward the glass. Maple stirred, eyes opening slowly. Cole blinked, rubbed his eyes and sat forward, his neck stiff from hours against the wall. "What is it, boy?" he asked, his voice rough. Scout didn't move, just stared. Inside the ICU, a vet tech had paused mid-step. She bent low beside the table where Mama Bear lay. A soft flurry of movement followed. Fingers adjusting monitors, calls made quietly into radios. Cole was on his feet before his brain caught up. Dr. Nadine appeared from the far hallway in a navy hoodie over her scrubs, hair tied in a messy knot, clipboard in hand. She didn't walk. She moved like she already knew what she was about to confirm. She stepped inside the ICU, the door shut softly behind her. Scout paced. Maple let out a low, questioning whimper and pressed her nose to the glass. Seconds passed. Then the door opened again. "She's breathing more evenly now," Nadine said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut straight through the quiet. "Still weak, still critical, but there's a pattern. That's new." Cole's chest rose, held. Nadine kept talking, her eyes on the glass. "And when we touched her muzzle, she reacted." Maple yelped. One high-pitched, unrestrained bark. Scout pressed forward, pawing gently at the door. "She hears them," Nadine whispered. She turned to Cole, her eyes softer now. "She knows they're here." He clenched his fists so tight his knuckles cracked. "She's not gone," he murmured. "She's hanging on." Then it happened again. A flicker. Inside the ICU, Mama Bear shifted slightly, barely more than a tremor, but her back leg twitched and her ear lifted just enough to catch sound. And then unmistakably her tail moved, just once. A slow, weak arc of fur across stainless steel. Maple barked again, louder this time. Scout's tail thumped hard against the wall. Cole stepped forward, his hand against the glass like it might let him give her strength. "Come on, girl," he whispered. "Come on back." Inside, a tech adjusted the IV, another checked the oxygen. The machines kept beeping their steady rhythm. Nadine stayed near Mama Bear's head, one hand on her shoulder, the other brushing gently behind her ear. "She's got some fight left." she said over her shoulder. It's buried deep, but it's there. I knew it, Cole muttered. I knew it the second they ran into traffic. They weren't running away from something. They were running to someone. Nadine glanced at him. You really think they chose you? No, he said. I think they chose someone. I just happened to be paying attention. Another soft sound from inside. Mama Bear shifted again, her head turning slightly toward the side of the kennel where Scout had planted himself like a statue. Her eyes didn't open, but that tail moved again. 2 slow beats this time. She's responding to them, Nadine said, smiling now, the corner of her mouth lifting. Not us, them. She's a mother, Cole said. She didn't survive for herself. No, Nadine agreed. She survived for them. Maple pawed at Cole's boot, clearly confused why she still wasn't inside. Scout let out a low huff, frustrated. They know she's still in there, Cole said. They knew before we did. I believe that. Nadine said, her voice quiet. Some dogs, they don't just feel the world, they know it. She looked back into the room. We're not out of the woods, but this is different. What changed? Cole asked. She got a reason. He swallowed hard. The tail moved again. Just slightly, just enough. The ICU tech stepped out to update the overnight chart. Nadine followed, then paused beside Cole. We'll keep her on fluids, slowly up her calories, monitor her organs, electrolytes. It's a long road, but she's taking the first step. I want to stay, Cole said before he could stop himself. Nadine didn't even blink. Good. As she walked off, Cole sat again. This time not against the wall, but with his back to the door, shoulder brushing the glass. Scout came to his side and laid his chin across Cole's knee. Maple curled next to them both. He looked at the two of them. You gave her a reason, he said. Scout blinked slowly. Cole didn't cry this time. He just watched the glass, watched the rise and fall of that battered chest beyond it. It was still low, still fragile, but for the first time, it was full of something new. Fight, the pen hovered, just above the signature line. Cole stared at it like it might bite. The paper in front of him was simple. 1 page, black ink, 2 lines for the foster's name and signature, and a box checked temporary. But the weight behind it wasn't ink. It was commitment. It was acknowledgement. It was a door he'd promised himself never to open again. Kelsey stood across the desk, giving him space. She didn't push. She didn't explain the lines again. She just waited. Scout and Maple were curled near the office door, tails sweeping the floor every time a staff member passed. They didn't look concerned. They looked home. Cole lowered the pen and signed. Guess I'm the guy now, he said under his breath. Kelsey nodded. You were the guy the moment they found you. The paperwork slid into a folder. Just like that, the pups were coming with him. He didn't have crates, or the right food, or enough towels. But when he opened the truck door, they jumped in without hesitation. Scout took the passenger seat like he was clocking in for a shift. Maple nestled in the footwell, her chin resting on the edge of the seat, eyes watching every move Cole made. The house hadn't changed in years. It was quiet, practical, and clean in a way that suggested no one lived there long. Cole had built it after Trigger passed, a place too empty to carry echoes. He had never replaced the chewed baseboards, never fixed the torn screen on the back door Trigger used to nudge with his nose. He didn't expect the noise when he opened the front door. Scout darted in first, paws skittering on tile, nose to every corner like he was running a perimeter sweep. Maple hesitated for half a second, then followed, tail wagging slow and curious. Within minutes, it wasn't quiet anymore. They barked at the vacuum that hadn't been used in months. They chased each other in loops around the coffee table. Maple dragged an old slipper across the floor like it was treasure. Scout investigated every cabinet under the sink. And then it happened. Cole was standing in the hallway, watching them turn the sterile space into something real, when Scout disappeared into the bedroom. A moment later, he emerged with something in his mouth. A single cracked leather slipper. Dusty, worn, Trigger's old slipper. Cole's breath hitched. He'd left it under the bed the day Trigger died and never touched it again. Not because it was valuable, not because it meant something in itself, but because throwing it away would have felt like erasing something sacred. Scout trotted over and dropped it at Cole's feet. Then he sat, tail still, eyes locked. Cole knelt, picked up the slipper, and held it in both hands. The weight of it wasn't physical. It was memory. It was grief. It was loyalty that outlived the body. Maple came up beside him and licked his wrist once. "You too," he said softly, "are going to wreck me." Scout gave a small bark, not loud, just enough to cut the emotion before. It sank too deep. They made a nest in the living room by evening. Cole pulled out the old dog bed he'd shoved into the back of the closet years ago. Maple climbed in like it had been waiting for her all this time. Scout, predictably, laid right across the threshold to the back door, like a guardian. Cole didn't sleep much that night. Every sound from the pups made his heart squeeze. Every tiny sigh, every shift of paws on tile, every time Maple got up, just to confirm the back door was still there. The house had a heartbeat again. The next morning, Cole found himself standing in the pet store, blinking against bright lights and too many options. He hadn't been there in years. The smell of cedar and rawhide used to hit like a punch to the chest. This time, it didn't. He picked out 2 beds, 3 toys, a new water bowl, and almost without thinking, 3 collars. Not 2. 3. He stopped at the cashier. "They're yours?" The teen behind the counter asked, eyeing the collars. Cole hesitated, then nodded. "They found me." Scout and Maple adjusted quickly to their new world. Maple figured out where the back door led in less than an hour. Scout learned that the bottom kitchen drawer was where Cole kept snacks, and how to open it. The silence that had defined the house for years was replaced by the scrape of nails, the shuffle of paws, the occasional bark, and the deep exhale of something that felt like presence. Cole didn't talk to himself as much anymore. He talked to them. He told them about Trigger, about the truck he rebuilt by hand, about the time he tried to fix his neighbor's garbage disposal and ended up shorting out the power to the entire block. They listened, and every time he looked into their eyes, he saw something he hadn't seen in years. Expectation, not of food or treats, but of a role, a place, a man who would stay. Cole didn't know what would happen next. Mama Bear was still in critical care. The updates were slow, hopeful, fragile. But Scout and Maple were home, at least for now. And when Cole stood by the window that evening, watching the sun drop below the tree line and 2 shadows curl against his feet, he realized something. He hadn't rescued them. They were the ones who had walked into his silence and cracked it open. The phone buzzed just after 12:37 a.m. Cole sat on the floor of the living room, his back against the couch, still wearing the same flannel shirt he'd had on since morning. Scout lay beside him with his chin draped over Cole's thigh, dozing but still half alert. Maple paced in slow, irregular loops across the hardwood, her ears flicking with every creak of the old house. He didn't check the phone right away. The screen lit up again. "Call Dr. Nadine, Hope Creek Shelter." Cole answered without a word. "She stood," Nadine said. No small talk, no delay. She stood on her own. Silence hung for half a beat. "She stood," he asked quietly, as if saying it too loud might undo it. Just for a few seconds, but she pushed herself up. Shaky, but no assistance, and she looked at one of the techs and wagged her tail. Cole didn't move. He didn't respond. He just let the words settle into the cracks of something that had been broken for a long time. "You still there?" Nadine asked. Maple suddenly barked, sharp and high-pitched, almost like a yelp of joy. She stopped pacing and galloped across the room, then circled again, this time faster, her tail a blur. Scout lifted his head, sniffed the air, and gave Cole's wrist a single, slow lick. "I'm here," Cole said finally. He looked across the room at the small wooden table where 3 new collars lay side by side, red, blue, and black, still with the tags tucked underneath. He hadn't touched them since he got home from the store, hadn't needed to, hadn't dared. "I bought collars today," he said, not really sure why he was telling her. 3 of them. Nadine paused. "You were hoping?" "No," he said. "I was preparing for what I wasn't ready to admit." Maple rushed over and leapt onto the couch, barking once at the window as if the good news had carried out into the night. She trotted back down and nudged the table with her nose. The collars clinked gently against the wood. "She's not out of the woods," Nadine said. "But it's the first real sign we've had. Her vitals are improving. Her blood work's stabilizing. She knows they're okay." Cole said, "I think that's why she's fighting." The weight of it, hope, grief, disbelief, settled in his chest like a stone just warm enough to hold. "I'll be in tomorrow," he said. "No rush." "She's resting now, but I thought you'd want to know." "I did." He hung up and stared at the phone in his hand. Maple nosed his elbow, then leapt into his lap without asking. She wasn't as small as she thought she was. Her back legs spilled over the edge, and she adjusted clumsily until she was almost balanced. Scout moved closer, pressing against Cole's side, tail thumping twice. Cole reached for the collars. The red one first. Maple sniffed it, then wagged like she'd just been handed a badge of honor. The blue one went to Scout. He nudged it with his nose, then turned and walked a proud circle around the coffee table, like he was already wearing it. And then the black one. Cole held it in both hands. It was a simple piece of gear. No embellishments. Sturdy, weatherproof, practical. It looked like something a survivor would wear. He traced the silver tag with his thumb, then whispered into the quiet, "You stood." He didn't cry. Not this time. He just let the warmth take over as the pups pressed into him. The old house no longer echoed. It vibrated, with footsteps, with breath, with purpose. He clipped Maple's collar on first. It clicked into place like it had always belonged. Scout sat perfectly still as Cole fastened his. The black one remained on the table, waiting, ready. When Cole finally stood to turn off the kitchen light, Scout followed like a shadow. Maple darted past him and launched herself onto the dog bed she'd claimed as her own, spinning once before flopping down with a huff of satisfaction. Cole paused before heading to bed. He looked at the third collar again, and smiled. Not wide, not dramatic, just a shift, like something inside him had stood up too. Hope Creek was quiet that morning. The intake wing, usually buzzing with barking and shuffling paws, had been cleared for the moment. The staff stood to the sides, not out of protocol, but because they knew something rare was about to happen. Cole stood just inside the door, heart pounding in his ears. He hadn't slept the night before. Not really. He'd paced, sat on the edge of his bed, stared at the empty collar on the kitchen table, until Scout came over and dropped a chew toy in his lap like an offering. Maple had slept on the floor beside the couch, ears twitching every time the wind hit the window. Now they were here, pressed against the shelter's steel gate, bodies trembling, not in fear, but in anticipation. Then the latch clicked. Scout and Maple didn't wait. The kennel door swung open, and both dogs exploded forward, sprinting across the tile like 2 arrows fired from the same bow. Cole didn't move. He couldn't. The air in his lungs felt too thick to swallow. Mama Bear stood at the far end of the open kennel space, barely steady, her legs thin and quivering beneath her, but upright. Her fur was still patchy, her ribs visible beneath her coat, but her eyes were open, bright, focused, and when she saw them coming, her ears perked. She tried to step forward, stumbled, caught herself, then waited. Scout reached her first, slowing only at the last second, ears pinned, tail wagging in frantic bursts. He tucked his body low, nose under her chin. Maple collided into her side with a yelp, high, sharp, filled with something bigger than joy. It was relief, the kind that lives between heartbeat and collapse. Mama Bear lowered her head and licked both of them. Once, twice, again. Her back legs began to shake, and she sank slowly to her elbows, still upright enough to gather them close. No one said a word. Cole's eyes burned. A tech approached him quietly, a young man in scrubs with sleeves rolled to the elbows. He didn't look at Cole when he spoke, just watched the dogs. "She didn't survive," he said. Cole turned toward him. "What?" The tech finally met his eyes. "Not really, not the way we expected. She should have been gone. Body temperature, blood loss, the organ stress alone." He shook his head and watched the trio across the room. "She didn't survive. She came back." Cole swallowed hard. He had no words. Mama Bear lay with her front legs curled around both pups now, her head resting atop Maple's back. Scout was half curled under her foreleg, his eyes closed, nose pressed against her chest. "They know," Cole whispered. The tech nodded. They always knew. For a long moment, no one moved. The shelter faded into the background. No ringing phones, no barking, just the low hum of lights and the soft breathing of a family remade. Then, slowly, Mama Bear turned her head. She looked straight at Cole, not past him, not through him, at him. There was no fear in her gaze, no hesitation, just something deep and quiet. Recognition. She lifted her chin slightly, almost regal, then licked Scout's ear one last time and began to rise again. Her limbs trembled, but this time she didn't falter. Scout moved to brace her side. Maple stayed close, moving step for step as she walked, slow but upright, toward Cole. He didn't kneel. He couldn't. He just stood there, hands clenched, jaw tight, breath shallow. When they reached him, Mama Bear stopped, lifted her head, and pressed it softly into his stomach. Cole broke. His knees gave first, then his arms wrapped around her neck like he'd known her his whole life. His face buried into the fur behind her ear. His voice shook. "You made it," he whispered. Scout curled around his back. Maple wedged herself under his arm. 3 bodies, 1 breath. No space between them. It wasn't a scene from a movie. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was whole. In the silence that followed, Cole didn't feel like a man who'd done something noble. He felt like a man who'd been cracked wide open and handed back something he didn't know he was missing. A family. When he finally looked up, Kelsey was standing by the kennel gate. She didn't say anything. She just smiled and pointed to the table behind her, where 3 tags waited in a small metal bowl. Red, blue, black, all engraved, all ready. Mama Bear pressed her nose into Cole's hand, and this time she didn't need to be held up. She stood on her own. For him. And for the first time, he let her. The front door creaked open just after sunrise. Cole stepped aside to let them in first, Scout, then Maple, then Mama Bear. She moved slower than her pups, but every step was steady. Her head was high. Her eyes were clear. This wasn't a rescue anymore. This was a return. Scout trotted inside like he was doing a security sweep, checking every corner like it had missed him. Maple followed, tail wagging as she sniffed at her familiar spot near the couch. Mama Bear paused just past the threshold, her paws pressing into the wood floor like she was memorizing it. Then she exhaled, slow and deep, and settled onto the sunlit patch near the front window. That's where Trigger used to sleep. Cole saw it the moment she laid down, the way the morning light wrapped around her fur, catching the edges like a halo. It should have gutted him. It didn't. It steadied him. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching the way they re-inhabited the space. No hesitation, no anxiety. They weren't testing the place. They were claiming it. Scout stationed himself on the windowsill, paws pressed forward, eyes scanning the street with the silent discipline of a watchman. Maple, meanwhile, was busy in the living room, dragging her toys out from the basket one by one and organizing them into two neat piles. One for chewing, one for chasing. Cole had no idea how she made the distinction, but she did. And she was proud of it. Mama Bear didn't move much. She didn't need to. Every so often she lifted her head to check on the pups. When she was satisfied, she'd lay it back down and close her eyes, letting the warmth from the floor soak in. Cole moved into the kitchen and filled 3 bowls with fresh water. He didn't even think about it. It was muscle memory now. He'd picked up the habit sometime during the second night. Maple refused to drink unless she saw Scout drink first. He walked back into the living room, placed the bowls gently on the mat, and whispered, "It's official. You're all home." Scout looked over his shoulder and thumped his tail once. Maple barked, one short, celebratory yip, and trotted over to take a sip. Mama Bear didn't move, but Cole could see her tail shift slightly across the floor, the barest flicker of acknowledgement. Later that afternoon, the mailman arrived. Scout didn't bark. He stood instead, tail straight, ears alert, watching. Cole opened the door and waved. "She's back," the mailman said, nodding toward Mama Bear. Cole smiled. "She is. She looks whole. She's getting there." The man hesitated before stepping back onto the walk. "They're a crew." Cole looked behind him. Scout still on watch. Maple sprawled upside down in the middle of the hallway, a rope toy hanging from her mouth. Mama Bear asleep again, one paw resting lightly over her eyes like a curtain. "My crew," Cole said softly. "Yeah, that's exactly what they are." The mailman nodded once and left. That night, the air in the house felt different. Not heavy, not stiff. It breathed, the kind of breathing you only notice when you've lived too long without it. It was in the rhythm of claws tapping down the hallway, in the soft snore Maple made when her dreams turned playful, in the way Mama Bear shifted in her sleep, as if counting heads even now. Cole sat on the couch, a cup of lukewarm coffee in hand, the black collar resting on the table beside him. He hadn't clipped it on yet. It wasn't because she hadn't earned it. She had. She did the moment she stood back up at the shelter. But something inside him wanted her to claim it, not be given it. Mama Bear stirred. She stood, stretched slow and deliberate, then walked over to him and sat. Cole looked down. Her eyes locked with his. No fear, no need, just quiet, steady trust. He reached for the collar. She didn't flinch when he buckled it around her neck. The tag shimmered faintly in the soft light. She did everything. Cole ran a hand along the side of her neck, then let it rest there. "Yeah, you did." From the hallway came the sound of something falling, then a bark, then a whimper. Scout came skidding into the living room with Maple at his heels, both of them tangled in what appeared to be the living room blanket. Cole laughed. Not a chuckle, not a huff. A full, open laugh that filled the house in a way even he hadn't expected. The house didn't just breathe that night. It lived, and in the middle of it stood a man who never thought he'd open his heart again, a mother who had refused to die, and two puppies who had risked everything to make sure no one gave up. Cole finished his coffee, then knelt to the floor, gathering all three of them close. His voice cracked just a little when he said, "You brought this place back to life." Scout licked his jaw. Maple rolled onto her back. Mama Bear leaned into his chest. The old silence was gone now, replaced by something fuller, something that sounded like breathing and belonging. The morning sun broke through the clouds in soft beams, washing the Hope Creek Rescue Yard in gold. It was a full year to the day since Cole Maddox first pulled over on the side of a forgotten highway and met two dogs who refused to let their story end in the dirt. Now he stood in front of a small stage set up near the kennels, surrounded by folding chairs, shelter staff, volunteers, and a dozen dogs, some resting in laps, others perched beside wheelchairs or tugging at their leashes in excitement. Scout sat on Cole's right, regal and still, wearing a blue collar that had faded only slightly from the sun and time. Maple was on his left, tail swishing against the gravel, red collar bright and freshly cleaned. And nestled quietly behind them, her chin resting gently on Cole's boot, was Mama Bear. She was stronger now, though still lean. Her coat had grown in thick and soft, the black richer, the tan more golden than anyone remembered. But it wasn't the color of her fur that turned heads. It was her presence. When she walked into the yard earlier, the noise dimmed. Even dogs that usually barked non-stop fell into curious silence. Mama Bear didn't demand attention. She never had. She simply held it. A staffer stepped to the mic. Today's ceremony is about honoring the quiet fighters, the animals who never gave up, and the people who listened when they could have walked away. She looked directly at Cole. "You didn't just save lives that day," she said. "You gave them back a world worth returning to." Cole felt Maple press against his leg. Scout remained still as stone. Mama Bear looked up at him, just once, and blinked slow. After the speeches, the crowd mingled. People pet dogs, swapped stories, took photos. Hope Creek's newest rescue recruits wore little green scarves that read, "Available and awesome." A group of kids passed around a paper flyer that listed each animal's name and recovery story. Cole stayed near the back, hands in his pockets, watching his crew move among the people like seasoned diplomats. Scout sat stoic while a toddler clung to his neck. Maple flopped on her back for belly rubs. Mama Bear wandered just far enough to sniff a few hands before returning to her quiet perch under the shade tree. A small voice tugged at his sleeve. "Excuse me, sir." He turned. A girl, maybe 6, stared up at him with wide brown eyes and grass stains on her dress. "Did you rescue them?" she asked, pointing toward the dogs. Cole smiled. Not wide, not polished, just honest. "No," he said. "They rescued me." The girl tilted her head, like she wasn't sure if he was joking. "How?" she asked. He glanced toward Mama Bear. She was watching Scout and Maple, not with concern, but with pride. "They didn't let me stay lost," Cole said. The girl nodded solemnly, like she understood more than he expected, then skipped off to join the others. As the sun reached its highest point, Cole knelt beside Mama Bear. He ran a hand down her back, pausing at the collar, still black leather, still engraved. She did everything, and it worked. He looked at his dogs, his house, his life, all rebuilt, not because of grand gestures or perfect timing, but because 3 animals refused to let go of hope. Every morning since that first reunion had started the same way, 3 tails wagging, 3 bowls filled, 3 quiet reminders that healing doesn't come in a flash. It comes in the form of breath, presence, and second chances. He stood, calling softly. Let's go home." Scout fell into step at his side. Maple trotted ahead, tail waving like a flag. Mama Bear walked behind, her shadow long, her pace steady. The crowd parted as they passed, because some families don't come from bloodlines or contracts. Some are found on the side of the road, dirty, broken, still fighting. And when they choose you, you listen, you stay. As they reached the truck, Cole looked back once. The Hope Creek sign stood in bold white letters against a sky full of possibility. To anyone watching, it looked like the end of a good story. But Cole knew better. It was the beginning of everything. So if you're out there, wondering if one small act of compassion can change a life, ask yourself this: what would have happened if he hadn't stopped? If Scout hadn't stood in that road? If Maple hadn't cried? And if Mama Bear hadn't kept breathing, just long enough for someone to notice? We invite you to be that someone. Join the German Shepherd community. Support rescue. Share stories. Stand beside the ones who never stopped standing for each other, because every dog has a story. And sometimes, their story saves yours.